All right. Good? Cool. All right. Can y'all hear me okay? No, this. Oh, yeah. She can, but that's fine. Yeah. You can hear me? Yeah. I just want to make sure they can hear me. You guys hear me okay? Cool. Hello, everybody. About to kick things off in a minute. If we can settle down here. First of all, welcome to the first event we're doing in partnership with ServiceNow that I'm super excited about. Before we get into it, I want to talk a little bit about why we're doing this and why we think this is going to be really fun. So, obviously there's not a lot of, it's not been a lot of fun from a lot of companies over the last few years, but there are some that have actually been doing quite well and have been growing. And it's always important to look sometimes at those folks and understand what are they doing differently, what's going on. There's a lot we can learn from that. So basically, this is a really amazing opportunity for the community to kind of get to know a lot of the actual work that's being done at ServiceNow, which is a wonderful company that not a lot of us have paid attention to or heard of because they focus on something that we don't see as consumers very much, which is enterprise software. And so this is a great opportunity to, again, learn from all the folks that are doing the work. So I'm very excited to introduce, that's my phone going off. Sorry, guys. You can mute that. No. Apologies. So anyway, I'm very excited. My name is Alec. I'm from Learners. So it's my pleasure to introduce Avra Martin. If you want to come on up here, Avra. We'll give her a little round of applause. Yeah, welcome, Avra. And Avra is going to introduce our first couple of speakers who are going to be given a wonderful talk to kick things off here tonight. I'll give it over to you.
Okay. Is this on? Because you actually didn't seem very loud to me. Everybody can hear okay in the room, though? Okay, that's amazing. Hi. Welcome, everybody who's here. I guess good morning, good afternoon, good evening to anyone who's joining online. Thank you for taking the time to spend with us. I'm Avra Martin. I am a Senior Director of UX Research here at ServiceNow. I manage our research operations and strategies, and I'm really excited to have everyone here. As Alex said, this is kind of our brainchild. I came to him with this idea, October last year, and was like, what if we did a series on enterprise UXR? And he's like, yeah, I love it. And so, here we are. So we have a really fun evening for you. We're going to talk about Gen AI. I know this is a topic that's top of mind for so many. But first, I'm going to actually introduce our speakers to you. So first, we have Jessa Anderson. Jessa is a manager of the AI UX research team here at ServiceNow. She leverages her extensive research background and has an unwavering commitment to advocating for human-centered AI experiences. With over 4 years at ServiceNow, wow, that went fast, leading AI UX research, Jessa brings a unique perspective to the forefront, emphasizing her passion for enhancing user experiences and ensuring experiences are worthy of human trust. Awesome. And second, we have Haley Morton. Haley is a senior UX researcher on the AI platform team at ServiceNow. She started her journey in AI working as a data annotator, which is a very interesting story, so grab her afterwards so she can share it with you, where she learned about the AI development lifecycle while creating data sets to train computer vision. This foundational experience paved the way for her transition into UX research, a move inspired by her academic background in psychology and behavioral science. Today, she focuses on understanding how users perceive and approach adopting AI ML technologies and explores ways to build trust with users through explainable AI design. I'm hearing trust a lot here. Maybe a theme for the evening, I'm not sure. So we're going to actually give it up for you two. We're going to have a presentation, and then I'll introduce our panel members, and we'll move into a panel. Okay, over to you.
For the introduction, Avra. We're really excited to be here. Since she just introduced us, I don't think you need us to introduce ourselves again. Thank you so much. So today we have a lot to talk about, and we're really excited about it. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is generative AI, why does UX research care, and then how we can help define Gen AI in enterprise settings, the role of UX research when we look at it in AI, and then some more applied learnings of Haley will walk us through what it looks like at ServiceNow going through a study, and then recommendations and takeaways for all of you to walk away with. And so what you will get to walk away from is, today you're going to get an overview of generative AI in enterprise and where UX research fits in. Some unique considerations, so if you haven't necessarily done UX research for AI, things to really consider when you're helping create generative AI experiences. An example of a deep dive of a human-centered AI principles to create a meaningful experience for an agent. When I say an agent, I mean someone who helps resolve a ticket or case or incident if you have an issue. And then top takeaways that you get to walk away with. So if you start to create generative AI experiences for in your product or company. One quick call out, because we get lots of these questions. We're not today focusing on how UX researchers can use and apply generative AI tools in the field. Great topic, really interesting, just not what we're doing today. So first, why are we even talking about AI and UX research? So we want to take a framing in a way and say right now it kind of feels like maybe the only constant is change. Things are moving fast. AI technology is rapidly evolving. And there are current constraints with the way the technology is right now. For example, some of the inaccurate content, the time it can take to load, things like this that inform people's experience. But those constraints may not and likely will not be the same constraints of tomorrow. Things are moving really quickly. In fact, we did a study that was only about 10 to 11 months apart with agents. So again, those people helping resolve tickets and cases. And this was a general population, about 200 agents. And in just the 11 months from, I think it was February last year, 2023, to December, January this year, we found that only 40% had even been aware of generative AI tools like ChatGPT, Bard, etc. And that jumped to over 90% reporting using generative AI tools. And important in enterprise, 60% are using them in work as well. So this is coming. People are using it. They're experimenting. And it's really critical for UX research to be involved. And that's why we want to emphasize that here, is that sometimes it may feel overwhelming or daunting. I know there's a lot of mixed feelings right now in the UX research community about what's happening with generative AI for themselves personally, as well as for what it means for their users. And we want to say, this is where UX research really plays such an important pivotal role, because you are the closest to your user, and you can see how quickly expectations are changing, how quickly experiences and exposure is changing. You are the closest to your user and get to represent to your product teams and bring in that perspective. And it's really important and pivotal to do. And the other good thing is there are known UX research best practices that you can use to help navigate through this place. So all the skills you already have, they still apply. There's just some different considerations to think through when you start to bring in AI. And so let's do a very quick level set for anyone who's not familiar with it on what generative AI is. We're going to take a step back and say there's traditional or classic AI, which has been around for a very long time. Some people say AI is the oldest new technology. AI is not brand new. It may feel like it with generative AI bursting onto the scene with about a year, 2 years ago, but it's not. And so I want to say traditional or classic AI is really, really good at patterns and recognizing patterns. And it gets trained on data to make these predictions. So one way to think about it is assembling a jigsaw puzzle into a known piece of art. It can predict what that next piece is really, really well because it learns. However, it does not generate and create net new content. That's what generative AI does. So its name is quite telling. It generates new content, including images, text, code, workflows, all sorts of different modalities. And it also learns from data to generate these novel outputs. So the image here, that we like to think of it kind of like painting on a blank canvas. And like an artist, who also is informed by their experiences or their data inputs, Generative AI is also greatly informed by what data it's trained on, and it'll influence what it ends up creating and making. And what's really interesting with generative AI is it does produce this really realistic and coherent content. And one of the things that sets aside is it uses natural language. So if any of you have explored with any of the tools like ChatGPT, DALL-E, et cetera, you use your natural language and put in what's called a prompt to tell it what you want it to do and generate. And that is a shift we've seen from classic AI to generative AI. So again, very quick distinction we were making. Here's some example modalities. I'm not going to go into any detail. I just want to point out there are a lot of things it can generate. And it's not limited to just text or conversation, even though we may see those a lot, or images may be top of mind. There's a lot more it can do, and as it's evolving, we're going to see even more examples of modalities coming out as well, and mixed modalities too. But it's important for you as a UX researcher to know what these different ones are, to understand when you think about your user, what makes sense to bring in for them? What do they need to have at their fingertips, maybe? And that's where, again, we're going to fit in UX research. So one of the framings that we like to use is that, first and foremost, generative AI has to deliver value to both the organizations and the users. You're going to hear us talk about value a lot, and I'm sorry. Trust and value, you're going to hear it a lot. And they are intermingled as well. So if in order for organizations to achieve their value goals as well, cost reduction, let's say, then we need to make sure that the experience we bring to our users is actually bringing value to them and that they can trust it over time too. So this is one of our kind of framing things we're going to keep talking about, is that the AI experience needs to actually solve a real world problem and, again, bring value to the person using it in some way. And it's, like I said, it's coming. So this was a recent study that showed that 38% of the IT professionals were already implementing in some way generative AI at their enterprise company, and 42% were still exploring it, but it's on their roadmap, right? Gartner estimates that more than 80% of the enterprises will have implemented or deployed generative AI by 2026. So this is big. And what's great is, again, there's a huge role for UX research to play in this because it is more of an unknown in many ways, and it is changing quickly. So UX research is really pivotal. And there are a lot of use cases. These are only 9 of so many. I'm only going to talk about 3 of them really quickly that we're kind of exploring more recently in conversations here. So code generation, like for developers. Product development, which can even fall into helping developers too, like creating applications or on the more product management side of it. And then customer support. You'll hear a deep dive example from Haley on that, going back to our agents who help solve people's cases and incidents. But there are a lot to do. And it's important for you to remember what these use cases are again and where they might fit in to help your users and really deliver the most value. And then it's also critical because to most people at the end of the day, I don't know if you've had many conversations with people who maybe aren't as closely in sync with where generative AI is. AI just needs to help them complete their task. It needs to help them solve a problem. It needs to help make time for them to do what they want to do, whether it's at work to focus on more meaningful things instead of mundane tasks, or in their personal life so they can go spend time with their families or whatever really matters to them. And so that's what AI needs to do. And even knowing the difference between AI and generative AI, that may not matter much to the person. Knowing it's AI, that's important. The exact type of model on the back end, that is probably less important because they just need to know it's helping them and then understand how they can get value from it and trust it. So that comes to what's it like when we conduct UX research for generative AI experiences. First, I will say the cross-functional collaboration is next level and critical. This is just some of the people we just came up with on the top of our heads of who we work closely with when we are doing UX research when it comes to generative AI. You can see there's a ton of different people with a lot of different lens and expertise they're going to bring. So what's the role for UX research to bring? For us, we think there's a lot we can do that focuses on the user. So 3 of them here are all about kind of the user and the human and solving real world problems. And then 1 of them is more about you. So learning, being curious, asking questions. This is of course in service of your user as well, but you do need to take the initiative to learn as well, understand a little bit about the different capabilities and what some of the implications are, where are some of the trade-offs for it, what could go wrong with it. These are things we do need to think through, and it's a really great opportunity to use I think most UX researchers I know are naturally curious and inquisitive. So leverage that, lean into that. Asking questions, especially to your diverse cross-functional team, is really important. I'm not going to go into detail with all these because Haley is going to do that for you later. But these are kind of what we say, this is what UX research is bringing. And again, really representing that human user view. You're the #1 champion, I think, for it. And then you partner with your team to make it a reality. We want to, again, emphasize avoid AI for AI's sake. You know, sometimes people are like, just sprinkle some AI on it. It's going to make it really cool. Don't do that. You can, again, position it and champion your user. Is this really solving something for them? Is what we're proposing bringing AI into actually going to slow them down? Is it going to lose their trust? Are they not going to use it? Is it going to cause other issues? That's a great thing for you to help solve for and bring to the forefront. And so this is from Nielsen Norma Group. We'll have a whole link of resources as well. But finding that appropriate solution where it makes sense within where the technology is today and where users are today and their user journey is really important. But there are unique risks of AI to consider. There's a lot. We're just going to go through 3 kind of bigger ones that are very top of mind right now. So the first is data security. We're seeing this come as concerns for people across all different user groups. So from end users, let's say like if I'm using ChatGPT, maybe I'm worried about what they're doing with the data. So I'm going to modify what I put in and use. For example, I would never put in any customer data or PII, anything like that, because I don't know what's going to be happening with it. So from the end of the user all the way to the buyers who are making the decisions of what they want to use and buy, how secure is it? How do they know? How do they then build their data governance and responsible AI? All of these things are really top of mind. And then ultimately for your product team needs to really be paying attention to this because it matters to all these different users. So it's a really important one to start thinking about and having conversations about. Related is data bias. Well, first of all, the data will never be perfectly representative of every single person. That's pretty much impossible. So bias is somewhat unavoidable. And what you can do, though, is be aware of it, know, and then help mitigate it and bring the attention to people to help resolve it too, or the vulnerable populations that may be affected by it. And again, this falls, in our opinion, within the scope of UX, within the scope of a UX researcher to know and advocate for as well. And this one's more unique to generative AI. Inaccurate outputs. Of course, classic AI could be wrong too. It could say the wrong puzzle piece, but it's not going to make up a puzzle. Generative AI could make it up, right? We've heard of hallucinations. And there's a lot in the news with that, a lot of potential consequences we know. But really, the thing that's a takeaway for this is that knowing that it can be inaccurate and in varying degrees. It could have some misinformation. It could misinterpret something, or it could omit something. These are all different ways it could be inaccurate. And so again, it comes up to trust and knowing your user too. How are you going to acknowledge that for users so they know when and how to use it, and know for your industry and use case as well when it might be really risky to have it. So we see in health, finances, some HR cases, right? It might be really risky for it there. So maybe that's not where we start. Maybe we start with somewhere a little safer where there's less risk. So these are the ones to consider because ultimately they can contribute to a lack of trust, and we know if they don't have trust, then they will not use it and will not get value from it. So we're back to that. And to go into more detail of what we do about this and for our different users, I'm going to pass it to Haley.
Thank you, Jessa. So when we're creating generative AI experiences in the enterprise, we're going to be working with a ton of different personas. That's just the nature of working in enterprise. We don't always just have one singular end user. And it's up to us to determine what are those unique needs? What are they going to get out of AI? So, oh, there's that down button. User perceptions and expectations of AI differ based on their own unique needs. And us as user researchers, we know this. This is our whole gig. We're all about finding what are the user needs, the pain points, how can we address them. And with all of the different personas that we have in enterprise, there's going to be varying needs and expectations about what AI can do for them, what AI can serve to that end user. So UX researchers are really there to help figure out where AI can help drive the most value for those end users. So I know we've been going into a couple of technical details, and you're probably wondering why there's a man holding a tomato on the screen. And I know that UX researchers love a good metaphor, so stick with me here. We can think of some of our different user groups using a comparison to the different people involved in a crop harvesting process. So stick with me. Oh, I'm so used to when I just do this. So we can think of the farmers. These are people that need to have a very in-depth knowledge of the land that they're working, the soil, the climate, what type of pests are typically there, what kind of seeds are they even able to plant. Their whole goal is harvesting a good crop so they can then bring that to a farmer's market and bring it to all of the people. And then we have the farm-to-table chefs. So think about people that work at restaurants that have like $3 signs on Google reviews. They need to know a lot about the products, how they were sourced, seasonality, what's in season, but they don't need to have that same level of knowledge that a farmer does. They just need to know that the crops that they're using are reliable so they can then prepare very consistent, high-quality meals. Then we have the home cook. This is someone who has a giant stash of Instagram Reels saved recipes on their phone, and they're just trying to get dinner on the table. So they just want to know whether the ingredient is correct and is it ripe. It's a little bit less of an in-depth knowledge than the chef or the farmer is going to need. So let's bring this back to enterprise. We can sort of think of our groups of personas that we serve here, at least at ServiceNow, as the different levels of understanding and knowledge that our end users need to have around AI. So the farmers, they're sort of like our implementers, the people that are introducing AI in their organization, and those who are responsible for configuring it and deploying it in their workplace. The chefs, they're the ones that are like using it every day. These are the employees that are using generative AI on the job, the ones that are using it every day. They're consuming it, and they need it to be reliable. And then we have our home cook, sort of infrequent end users. Again, they just want that reliability. They really can be spared the details here. But across all users, trust is at the center of building an impactful and useful generative AI experience. But trust might look different for that farmer compared to that home chef. There's going to be very different needs depending on who we're building it for. So Jessa actually gave a really great talk also for learners a while ago. It's recorded on YouTube where she goes into these in a lot more depth. But just to give you a quick sense, for control, someone who's going in and developing AI in an organization, they're going to need to know a lot more about the models, the data that was used to build it. They have a lot more control that they're going to have to oversee than someone like an agent who's just deciding whether or not they're going to use an AI prediction or not. So we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive on that sort of middle persona, so someone who's using generative AI in their work to help their tasks. And we've been talking about them a lot, but we're going to come back to this agent persona. And I'll explain a little bit more, but I'm highly confident that we've all interacted with one before. So agents are a really key persona here at ServiceNow. They're one of the personas that we build out for. It's the one area that I tend to focus on, so that's why I'm speaking about it here today. And we've all spoken to an agent before. These are our customer service agents, our IT help desk agents. If you've ever had to request a password reset, or you've ever had to get a refund for something online, these are all agents. We've all interacted with them. They're across every industry under the sun, And they're usually the sort of first point of contact or liaison between a consumer and a larger business. So something I want to remind us again is that we're not building AI for AI. We are building AI to solve a real problem. So something that we did here at ServiceNow when we were building out solutions for agents is we asked ourselves, what is the agent experience? What is it like for an agent to sort of sign in at the beginning of the day? And what are the pain points that they actually face? And where could AI actually go in to address some of these pain points? So the research that actually informed this, it wasn't generative AI research. We were doing ethnographic studies, talking to researchers who already have this expertise. And we were trying to understand, hey, what are some of those pain points that agents face on a daily basis, and what would be most suitable to address with generative AI? So I'll walk you through a couple of them. So agents spend a significant amount of time getting up to speed on a case. So again, I know we've all spoken to a customer service agent at some point. If you've ever been transferred on a call, you have to remember that the person you're being transferred to has to get up to speed on that case. They need to figure out what are the steps that have already been taken, how far along are you in the resolution process. These are all things that they need to figure out while they are supporting you. And that takes a lot of time. And while they're doing that, they're often getting context from a wide variety of sources. Normally they have like 2 monitors, they have a bunch of tabs open, a Teams chat with other agents, an email. They're working on multiple cases at the same time. So they're taking all of this information to help inform them how to best resolve the issue. Not only are they talking to us, the requesters, the people that are putting in the request, they're also talking to each other. So sometimes when there's a big outage or there is the holiday rush and a lot of people are submitting refund orders at the same time, this can be something that the agents are informing each other about, and they're sort of keeping each other in the loop on like a Teams chat. So we have to remember that they're sort of taking in information from all of these different sources, and that's going to inform how they then support someone like me who's trying to reset my password. They also migrate information across all kinds of different tools. Again, this is very time consuming. You can think of the data entry involved when they're supporting someone like me on the end of a case. So they're trying to say, what steps have already been taken? What am I supposed to do next? And they want to have this very nicely documented. And I want you to think of all of these different things happening while they have very strict timelines that they're usually working within. Sometimes they're being evaluated on how many cases they finish per day, how quickly they resolve a case. Sometimes they're resolving multiple at the same time. It's a lot. It's a lot on your plate when you're an agent. But the thing that matters most to them and where generative AI can have the most impact is eliminating some of that bureaucratic work that they're usually faced with that really bottlenecks them actually having providing solutions to someone on the other end of the line. And we've heard it time and time again from agents that the best part of their job is feeling like they've actually helped someone at the end of the day. And someone like me, that's also what I want. I want that to happen really fast. So everyone wins in that situation. So anywhere where generative AI, or anywhere where we can reduce the sort of manual, repetitive tasks is where generative AI is going to shine. In comes case summarization. So think back again when we've had that sort of handoff process between agents. One person is transferring you to another department, I'm waiting on hold, they're putting you through to another person, and they need to figure out quickly, hey, what's already been done on this case? What am I supposed to do next? Case summarization takes all of the documentation that's been consolidated in that case so far, and it puts it into a small little card that says to the agent, hey, this is what's happened, and here's what you need to know to resolve this case. Oh, I keep wanting to do that. What's going on? And I'll zoom in a little bit, and we can walk through a couple of the human-centered AI design principles that made their way into this card. And it's a small but powerful little card. We've got a couple of different human-centered AI principles here. So the first being transparency. Agents need to know where AI has generated content so they can then go in to review it. It's important for them to know that, hey, this was generated by AI. This didn't just come from a colleague or part of the documentation in the CRM. So it's just something to say, like, just so you know, this is generative AI. We also provide, or allow them to provide the ability to give feedback by a thumbs up, thumbs down mechanism to indicate the accuracy of the output. And this is something that we then use to retrain the model and have it continually improve over time, taking their feedback into consideration. And then, of course, we have control. This is super important for agents. So being able to decide, I don't want to use this summary. It's not really that helpful to me. Or maybe there's a detail in there that I didn't expect to see that I want to override. We find it incredibly helpful for them to have that control because agents are concerned that if something goes wrong, that their name will be attached to it and it'll look poorly on their performance reviews. So that actually segues really well into the sort of inevitability of inaccuracies. So there's all kinds of different ways that generative AI can stray off the beaten path. It's not going to be a perfect experience every time. And so we had a whole study on this. And it was around the perception of inaccuracies and the sort of willingness to accept these inaccuracies in that case summarization. So whether that's it generating information that was never there before, maybe it's talking about, I don't know, a person that wasn't even involved in the case, or it's getting their name wrong, or it's missing really critical information that needs to be there. They still see the value in generative AI. They still say, hey, this will save me some time in going through all those notes, so if it makes a couple mistakes here and there, that's okay with me. And they have that willingness to accept errors as long as they remain in control, so allowing them to override it easily, looking back to that example we just saw of having them decide, have that final say, are they going to accept or reject this output? But the biggest caveat of them all is that they need to be made aware of this. When we did this research, most agents said, I wouldn't have the confidence to point out those errors unless you told me right out of the gate that this might actually generate incorrect information. So they need a heads up. They need some sort of onboarding to say, hey, this might not be accurate 100% of the time. Please look over it. And that made them so much more willing to accept, so much more willing to trust these AI-generated predictions. So a couple other considerations from those research initiatives on agents is that they are not the ones responsible for AI adoption in their organization. They are not the farmers, right? They are those chefs that we were talking about. And they're not the ones that need to have those success metrics the same way that maybe someone like an admin or a developer would be. So we can spare them those details. They really just want it to be a seamless job experience. Again, remembering they've got a lot of moving parts going on. Their job is very hectic. They're just multitaskers by nature. So we don't want to add any more chaos into that already very busy experience for them. We also need to assume that they have consumer-level AI knowledge. They don't need to have an AI 101 course to be able to use this tool. We want it to be intuitive, and we need to also be able to onboard them and fill in those gaps that are important for them. So again, if your summaries might contain inaccuracies, you need to tell them. You need to make sure that they're made aware of this before they start using the tool and then potentially have a bad experience where they decide, maybe I don't want to use this anymore. They lost my trust. And they might be hesitant to initially trust these outputs right out the gate as well. And that's understandable. This is new. It's something they haven't tried before. They need to be able to see it actually demonstrate that value over time and say, hey, this is actually helping me, rather than just being told that this is going to be a helpful tool. They need to make that decision for themselves. So we gave you a couple of principles of how we can be, do our due diligence as UX researchers in the generative AI space, but let's actually not just talk the talk, let's walk the walk, and I'll kind of review what we've done in our agent research that aligns with some of those principles. So at the very beginning, again, we leveraged research that was already being done on agents that didn't even have anything to do with generative AI. So what is that agent experience like? Have people done ethnographic studies on this before? How can we take that to identify actual pain points and then inform our product? But that's not just asking questions to our end users. It's also asking questions to our model teams and learning about potential limitations. So those conversations aren't just happening with our end users, they're also happening with our product team so we can understand, what is the model that we're working with? Are there potential risks? Is this data set have a bias that end users need to be made aware of? We need to also be having those conversations in that direction. And being the champion of our end user, Concept testing is so key. We do it so many times here at ServiceNow, especially in the platform team, doing a lot of iterative concept testing across sort of different levels of fidelity and making sure we get that feedback really early and identifying those sort of moments where agents say, I'm not sure about that, or I don't know if I would use that. So really catching, when that would happen through iterative concept testing. And again, advocating for that onboarding experience and any knowledge gaps that they might have. Building their trust, prioritizing the human need. So again, understanding what is their risk tolerance. At what point would they decide they want to stop using the tool because it's not accurate enough for them? We also need to build empathy to why they might be hesitant to adopt it. We've heard so many times that they say, well, I don't want to train this thing, it's going to take my job. I mean, I don't want it to be that good. So we have to kind of have that empathy extend in the other direction with agents and make sure that we're really building that empathy and understanding what is this impact going to have. They're the ones using it on a daily basis. And finally, last but certainly not least, is we want to make sure that AI is solving a real-world problem, and it's resolving an existing pain point and not just saying, we want to build AI for agents. Okay, cool. It's actually taking problems that agents face on a daily basis and trying to best address that with generative AI. So, if Gen AI comes for your product, what can you do? It's not magic, right? So generative AI isn't going to just come in and magically solve all of the things that it needs to do. It's a human-built technology that is used by humans. And as user researchers, we're really good at that. We're really good at advocating for the end user, but also understanding sort of internally what are some of the limitations that maybe these users need to be made aware of. So we just need to make sure that we're not coming in and allowing it to sort of take the reins. We're doing our due diligence and understanding the risks. And this is just a sort of reminder of what we've gone over before, but just to remember to learn, be curious, ask questions, not just to your end users, but to your product teams. There are certain risks and considerations for AI that we need to be made aware of that's going to require a little bit of homework on our end as UX researchers, right? So there's all kinds of resources out there. We'll be providing some of them to you after the session. A couple off the top of my head, the Coursera generative AI courses and AI foundational courses are fantastic, but at least understanding the landscape of data, bias, risk, and just the overall state of technology, this is going to make your job so much easier for advocating for the user so you can have the terminology to really equip yourself with when you're in those conversations with your product teams. You also need to learn the mental models of your end user, right? So going back to that farmer and that chef example, there's going to be very different expectations and needs on who you're building for, and you need to learn that language of who your end user is and make sure that you're meeting them where they are and you're not assuming anything of where their AI knowledge is at the moment. And you need to communicate that. You're an advocate. You're in those product teams and you're saying, hey, remember, there's going to be someone that uses this at the end of the day, and we need to make sure that this matches their level of expertise. Also, we need to recognize and share consequences if an AI is inaccurate. This can be a little bit of an awkward conversation, I think, for some of us, but it's one that we really need to have because it's going to have a very rippling impact to our end users. So really speaking up and being brave in those conversations and saying, hey, there's someone that's using this, we need to think of the consequences if something is inaccurate. And again, earning their trust and building it over time through onboarding, through clear communication, and through being really transparent to end users about the limitations. And last but not least, ensure that AI is solving a real-world problem. So making sure that this is actually something that we're not just making users use because it's the fun new thing, that it's actually something that is driving value for them and solving a real-world pain point. And that's really where we have a fantastic seat at the table right now. UX researchers can help advocate for when AI solves a real problem and isn't just the fun, trendy thing to lay on top of all of our enterprise products. So it's best for us to advocate for to better meet end users' needs and to recognize when AI might not be the best solution because it isn't always the one. And that's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, ladies much. I'm actually going to start with questions that came through online, like balancing analog and digital right this second. And I'm going to put them in a little bit reverse order that they came in based on your talk and the findings that you've shared with us. So this is a great one from Devin. Do you let users turn off AI? And is that something that should be allowed in product?
I can't answer for like any specific product, but the idea of control and when they can use it and not use it is really imperative. So what they do have, for example, in the agent one, is they can choose to use it or not use it. So the choice is on them for that part. The other area that gets into questions is more of on the data side and how their data may be being used and collected. And I think that's a really current space that everyone's exploring. And there's trade-offs on both sides of what that looks like. But for us, it's always championing what the user really needs and wants and what's going to gain trust for them so they can learn to use it if they want to, if it adds value.
I love that. Tabanitha sent over a message. She wanted to know what types of methods are you using most often when you're doing AI research and why?
Oh, I can do this one. So many concept tests. So whether your prototype is built out from end to end or not, just getting that in front of end users and getting that feedback super early, just directionally to decide, hey, is this a right fit or not? I would say a moderated concept test is probably the most frequent thing we have in our back pocket here, and being able to iterate on that quickly. So following up and saying, okay, we're gonna make a couple changes and then we're gonna see, did this resonate? Did we make the right decision? And then having that risk mitigated before it gets developed.
But we also do mixed methods as well. So like the survey we brought up in the beginning, revisiting that for prioritization as well as their current expectations and perceptions. And with like early adopters who are using it in the real world, surveys with them to get their sentiment and things like that. So it's a really mixed method approach, but a lot of iterative concept testing for sure.
Yeah, I love that because I think the approach is really similar to the way that we think about UX research with any product, and really at the core being human-centric,
Yes,
right? What are we
100%.
trying to solve for? Understanding the competitive landscape,
Yeah.
what is the research telling us in the field, and then going through the life cycle. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And I think that, there's not a good Gen AI UX research method, and trying to sort of distance ourselves that there is one, and
That's
just
right.
knowing like, hey, this is just a user that we're advocating for at the end of the day still, so we have to still be using those methods that get us there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, love that. Okay, so we have another one, anonymous message. When you look at all the new startups and tools that are out there, how much feels real and how much is hype? It feels like you have a slower, more methodical approach and the consumer tools are moving fast.
That's a really good question.
Boom, anonymous.
Do you want me to take the first pass?
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, a lot of that's a personal perception, right? What I personally may think about it. The consumer ones are moving really fast, and that's why you brought up like how we can do kind of a UX competitive analysis. We can look at what else is out there to see how are people using it? What are they pushing the limits for? How is that landing? So in that way, we can look at that. But as an enterprise company, we are going to move slower with what we're rolling out, and our audience is different than a general consumer. Our audience is an employee who has real needs, or a requester who needs something to be solved, or a developer, right? We have these different types of use cases. So sometimes I think it can be tempting to compare to all the consumer experiences, but that might not be the thing that is going to actually solve the pain points that are going to add the most value.
But is it real or hype?
The LLM pens are hype.
The LLM
I'm calling that out right now.
All right. Okay, actually, I'm going to skip back to one of the first questions that came in from Jen. With the productivity increase through the use of Gen AI, how do we assure ourselves that businesses won't eliminate roles across departments because of a superficial understanding of the process?
Do you want to do that? I know you've done some work with the agents.
Yeah, it's really challenging, and I think it's going to be a really long time before especially really human-centric roles are fully automated. Again, I can speak really highly to the agent experience. Some of this really, again, is giving agents back that agency, for lack of a better term, to solve the real human core of that issue. So if you think of people who are working in roles like insurance companies, these are people that are typically dealing with requesters, people writing in because something really terrible happened to them, right? There's still going to be that human touch, and I think more realistically, we'll be seeing roles be augmented rather than automated, and having AI sort of step in to then allow people to have more of that human focus and being able to kind of connect more face-to-face than they would without all of that sort of bureaucracy standing between them. So maybe that's an idealistic answer, but I think with like the at least the agent landscape, that's something that probably won't be going away anytime soon.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that feels right, is really creating more space for people to do the things that only humans can do, and the things that really give them purpose and richness in their work, and removing some of the mundane tasks that really don't bring us joy.
Exactly.
Joy. Okay, I am actually going to, we have a couple more questions in here around different courses and education. I'm going to save those for the panel so I can turn it over to this room and see, do we have any questions in the room for these two? Oh, okay, Alec has a question.
What's your favorite thing that you've seen in the Gen AI space? So when you work in a very specific part of it, it's like the most exciting thing that you've seen that you're excited to play with and the tools that you learn.
Question is, most exciting thing that you've seen in the Gen AI space?
Okay, so for me, it's not a specific tool, and maybe that's not a fun answer, but it's more just seeing how people are experimenting with it. It's kind of like the Wild West, the same way that the internet was when it first came out. And again, with agents, love to talk about agents. It's been really interesting seeing how they use Gen AI tools on their own. A lot of them are using it to experiment, to do things like, hey, they're working in a really technical role, and they want to make their response to the person who wrote into them a little bit easier to understand. So they're using things like ChatGPT and saying, hey, explain this to someone like they're a 5-year-old. And they try to really simplify these complex terms and make them more understandable to people that don't have that technical know-how. So just watching people kind of experiment and play with Gen AI, I think is like one of the most fascinating things right now.
I have like a very specific non-work example that I think is really cool is watching them make the art with generative AI. So I'm not talking about like images like Dolly and stuff, but like those interactive changing ones. Like in New York, they had it at the Met, and in Las Vegas, again, all those are coming up. Like I think that's fascinating to watch unfolding, and how they're augmenting their already artistic side using generative AI to create these new things together. That's really exciting to me.
Awesome. Anything else from the audience? Yes.
AI for the sake of doing AI. It's like a really bananas example.
Oh gosh.
AI
An
for the sake
LLM
of
pen?
doing AI. We're looking for the most outlandish idea.
I mean, that LLM pen is out there. No. I mean, maybe. A real one. Gosh, that's hard to be put on the spot.
Yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head.
I'm trying to think too. Not off the top of my head. I'll maybe get back to you. It'll come to me.
Okay, well, we'll go think about it.
Okay.
And we will, we'll expect that at the
Okay.
end of the, right? We're going to keep them honest. Thank you so much. If you have any additional burning questions for Jessa and Haley, we are going to bring them back into the panel. So save them for later.
Thank you.
But we're going to go ahead and switch gears.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
It's up there.
All right, we're going to turn the clicker off. There we go. All right, so we are going to switch gears. We're going to move into our panel section. We have about 40 minutes or so. So I'm going to break this up kind of into 3 parts. We're going to start with Di and Rita, who I'm going to introduce here in just 1 minute. Then we're going to reintroduce Haley and Jessa, and then we're going to just open it up to questions, whether it be from our virtual or in-person audience. So let's start with the introductions. Drum roll, please. Rita Castillo. Rita has been here forever. No, really. She's been here. She's one of the founding members of our design organization. She's been here for 6.5 years at ServiceNow. She is now the VP of Design for Platform and AI at ServiceNow. Her background in human factors and behavioral psychology, combined with experience in consumer, biotech, and enterprise enables her to drive innovation, high quality, and standards across the platform and products. Rita co-sponsors the Women in AI group at ServiceNow, encouraging and elevating women in AI fields, and is a steadfast champion of a human-centered approach to AI design to promote responsibility and trust. Rita, come on up and take a seat with me. Yes. Anyone? All right. We have Dai Lee. Dai is a human-centered and responsible AI strategist, focusing on guiding the development of ethical AI and intelligent technology at ServiceNow. Her expertise is broadened by a foundation in human-computer interaction, spearheading initiatives in research and design to make AI technology accessible and beneficial to those without specialized experience. Her efforts have been pivotal in establishing standards for human AI collaboration, helping to expand the adoption of intelligent systems globally. Dai, come on up here. All right. Well, thank you for joining me. This is incredible. It's really exciting.
How do we follow up with that previous presentation?
Oh my gosh.
Fantastic.
They were amazing. Like, let's clap for them again. That was
Yes.
For audience members that weren't here, if the camera did pan and you saw me in front, I was bobbing my head like a bobblehead because all of the points, I was like, yes, exactly.
I know.
So good.
Everybody probably saw that. You were the person.
Constantly nodding.
Yes, I love that. I love
like
that.
at a rock concert.
It was. I was trying to be very quiet with my laughter because I loved that all those things that you said about agents and all the time we spent here together. Those are all spot on.
Yeah, and I think what's really rich about the conversation we're going to have tonight is how long all of you have been working together as a team. It's been over 3 years. And so a lot of these things we've really seen in practice, like when we talk about collaboration, the development of enterprise products, the kind of cross-functional partnership that's necessary for success, the ethical considerations. Like these are all very lived experiences of these 4 people. So I'm pretty excited about this. So let's just jump in because this is enterprise UXR. And so we're talking enterprise. So what are the key challenges faced when integrating AI technologies into existing enterprise software systems and the best strategy for overcoming these challenges? It's a long one.
So I can just give a brief answer. And so for me, it's really the key word is what Haley said, it's augmentation. So when we're looking at putting AI or generative AI into any of the enterprise workflows, we're actually looking to place it where the person's already doing their work. So we really want to make sure that it becomes part of their workflow. And what we're looking to do is help them shorten portions of their workflow that are those mundane, repeatable pieces and help them get ahead faster so they can get that better time to value. And so for me, you want to look for those spaces, whether it's AI or generative AI, make sure you're finding something that works with their workflow. Because again, training and onboarding is so important. You're not trying to change their work, you're trying to help them accomplish it better.
That's so right. I think another side of that too is especially looking in the lens of an enterprise organization like ServiceNow that operates in different countries through different lenses with different cultures. When we start looking at policy, when we start looking at what an authentic and accurate AI experience or what delivers value is going to be very different. And you're going to hear me talk about that a lot today. It's like trust is the theme for today. But what trust means, what policy adherence means, is going to vary from country to country, society to society, culture to culture, and even building to building within the same organization. So I think that's the big challenge is many companies are looking to not just be compliant, but really be responsible in the way that we're navigating how we deliver enterprise software to the global economy. And I wanted to highlight that person who asked the question earlier about how we navigate, AI for AI's sake and innovation versus looking at the lens of what's practical. And I think that's something I appreciate about ServiceNow is that in one way, we're forced to really look at what Rita mentioned, which is like the pragmatic application and approach to AI, as opposed to who's going to do the next coolest thing.
The LLM pen.
The LLM pen.
Still waiting for that example. Yeah, and I mean, I think, what we do here at ServiceNow, there's a lot of breadth and depth to our product portfolio, right? And one thing that really stands out for me is what works with one product may not work for another. Can you explore or talk about that at all?
Yeah, within enterprise, you also have the difference between platform and products that are built on top of the platform. And so leading the platform team, we really try to understand the business unit workflows that will build products on top of us first, because we may build something that we think, like the case summary card that they showed as an example. That case summary card, we're like, this is great. Any kind of task could have a summarization associated with it. So for platform, we built this out. But what we needed to really do is understand what are the differences in the different tasks and cases that could come up? What are the different sources that we'd have to put as inputs in order for it to work in different industries and different business cases? And so we actually had to go back and redraw the flexibility of that generative AI skill so that it could be used across multiple places. And in some products we learned they don't even have that page shown first for the user. So we had to create a component that could actually go into different places on the product, different places on the page, on the mobile aspect. So for us, it's really important to understand the different places it could be used in order to see, can I make something flexible enough, or do I actually have to bifurcate and have multiple components?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I want to go down the design system route, but I'm gonna hold myself back here. But I think you're headed down this road anyway. Can you give us a successful example of AI in the enterprise software that has improved productivity or user experience?
I'll speak to the side that not a lot of people get to see, which is like internal tooling and the internal services that you provide to the people that are working in an enterprise organization. Previously, in a time not too long ago, people were conducting data annotation via spreadsheets. You had companies, not our company, but other organizations that I've worked with and talked with before were talking about the lack of representative data for their use cases. So there were teams that were scrubbing internet, social sites, and so forth, which doesn't really diversify and include all of the representative populi that are needed for their AI use cases. So with ServiceNow and other organizations, and as data practices have matured, something that I've seen that's become really successful is the use of generative AI to augment synthetic data sets, to work with expert data annotators or linguists to create data, modify data that is very specific to that vertical or that enterprise vertical's use case, which before just didn't exist, and it didn't operate in a way that was scalable. Data has always been a very expensive currency. It continues to be, but at least with generative AI and other technical capabilities, that annotation method, the augmenting of that data and making it specific to use cases is more supported now.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really love this idea of data as a currency. And how there are improvements over time.
There's talks that, for the longest time, data was the ultimate currency, and there's now a lot of people saying that the next wave of that might be compute.
Is that worth exploring? I don't even know exactly what that means.
Well, I was thinking about some of the services and the products that Jessa and Haley had mentioned, like the cloud services that we offer that allow a lot of our customers to reduce the barrier to entry in that AI space and use our computing power for their enterprise solutions.
Oh,
I
okay.
realized there I gave you a half-baked idea
was like-
from the expression.
So
that-
I don't know if everybody knows what that means, because I sure don't. So so thank you for expanding a little bit more. I really want to get into this area because I know it's something that's really near and dear to all of our hearts. Is really those ethical considerations for AI. So what are the ethical considerations that researchers and designers should keep in mind when developing AI solutions for enterprise use?
So I'm going to take a strategic organizational approach to answering that question because I really want you guys to hear from Di. But something that I think that companies can do a lot better is identifying people that actually can be champions for it, right? So we have Di, and her role is very unique in a company. And she's on the design team, but she is our coordination across all the company for ethics and responsibility with our data scientists and our research. She has such a unique skill set there, but it's so necessary for us to keep responsibility and trust and human-centeredness at the core of what we do, not just when we design something, but when we research it, when we get feedback from our customers, and bringing it back into our policies and procedures. I think a company would do better if they could do something like that and set up a structure where you have people in place that really think about this.
I need to pinch myself. Like, I need to take that moment because this is one of those, is this real life type things. So for context, I started out as a product designer. I joined ServiceNow as a product designer 4 years ago. And I remember at some point walking into Rita's office, virtual office, with my, ready to spread ethical AI propaganda. And I was like, so I want to have a talk with you about ethical AI and like how I feel really passionate about this with my many PowerPoint
To
slides.
anyone who would listen.
To anybody that would
everybody.
listen, like knocking on random doors when people are like, wait, what team are you on? But this goes to talk about what Rita, Jessa, and Haley were saying about this thought about augmenting and amplifying. Like, we talk about augmenting a lot, but there's this amplification of people's skill sets, their passions, what they actually want to do. And my role, especially in the traditional trajectory of a product designer, did not exist before. So the whole be curious, lean into what you want to do is very near and dear to my heart. That didn't answer the question, but I did want to revel in that moment for a second because it is very
Take it, own it.
meaningful.
This is
to
your
me.
moment.
But in terms of what UX researchers and UX designers can do, earlier in the presentation, somewhat the concept of bias was mentioned. And we are very aware, we're very conscientious, especially as UX researchers and designers, about marginalized communities. But something around the discussion of bias oftentimes falls to the responsibility of applied research scientists, data scientists, the engineers, the people making the models. And what I encourage is, as a UX researcher, as a designer, when you're doing concept testing, when you're talking to different people, does your group that you're talking to include everyone that should be in your intended user base that's going to be using your product or your system? Have you tested it among different people who identify with different types of abilities? Have you tested it through different layers of technical literacy that people might have? And another one that's very special to what our researchers are great at doing that is now becoming a hybrid approach with applied research scientists is looking at the implications emotionally, psychologically, and socially about deploying certain technologies, and what is that experience like? And I'm not trying to get all Marie Kondo, does it spark joy? But we are going down that route, like, does certain tasks spark more joy than others? Can you lean into those? Like, oftentimes I know when I was interviewing way back when, a lot of companies leaned in on like, well, are you a quant researcher or are you a qual researcher? And I'm sure we've all heard that, but there's such a heavy responsibility and really needed leaning in on the qual side of things for the way we conduct research that is even more important to generative AI.
There was actually a question, we didn't quite get to it from before, and it was about what is the difference of doing UX research for AI and UX research just UX research without AI in mind. And I would love to hear from your perspective from this lens of ethical AI, transparency, trustworthiness, responsibility, bias, these types of things. What are some of the considerations that people should have when they're building with AI in mind?
I think especially from switching the mental model from traditional software to designing and researching for AI, the one biggest shift that I found is going from, can they use this easily, to what are all the ways that we can break this and how does it go wrong? So it's almost like anti-usability testing to some degree, where we now apply a lot of like risk management type frameworks, those that come from any type of hardware background, manufacturing factory are very, very well versed in this, where you get a cross-collaborative group in a room and you try to break the system that you're making. And I think that's the biggest mental model, is going first, not from a point of efficacy and usability and ease, but where are all the areas that can go extremely wrong, and how do we build in points of thought, safeguards, and consideration to mitigate those types of risks.
Yeah, from a product perspective, we don't always, as designers, think about transparency and trust, right? We think about automation, we think about efficiency, getting it done fast. With generative AI, it's been really important to educate the designers to think about that a little bit differently. Like we always think about, oh, take the friction out. But with generative AI, in order for the chef and everyone to feel more comfortable about what's going into their plate of food, we have to take a moment to remind them to be aware that generative AI has these different things that it can do. And while we are building trust that way, we're also making sure that they can check on it themselves, right? And that they, when they find these pieces, so designers have to think about, how do I build that in? How do I make sure that I don't just automate a summary, because it's also expensive, right? Generative AI is not free. And so we have to make sure that our experiences that we think, oh, this is gonna help someone, I'll just put it in. No, we have to put it in where they have the control to decide whether or not to use it. We have to put in the ability for them to edit it and change it and correct it. We have to make sure that they can understand where it came from. So these are all things that are different from a standard design thought and design pattern. And then when we get to like, how does it break? What are the things that could go wrong? Those are also additional, because it's like, how do we gracefully degrade, right? If we are wrong, how do we not be in their way and add a burden? So these are definitely differences in how you would approach a product design.
Remember the book we all grew up on, Don't Make Me Think? Yes. We think about that all the time, where it just now we have to revisit those type of paradigms because they don't really apply to AI as much. We need people to think, especially because what is true and what is accurate is going to be different to different people.
Yeah, I think that almost runs counter to the way people probably perceive it. You know, AI is magic. I'm gonna think less, and it's like, no, we need you in the loop.
Yeah.
And we need to be thinking about these technologies. Ryan posted a kind of follow-up question, which I think is interesting from a ServiceNow perspective. How does ServiceNow mitigate potential bias present in data used to train generative AI models, and how do these biases impact users?
So we do have definite guardrails that we build into the product in different places. We build them into our training data. We build them into how we take in inputs. We build them into before we put an output in, that moderate for things like bias or, you know, inappropriate toxicity. Yeah, but the thing is that we need to make sure too that what we're training our initial models on, that data, those data sets are unbiased as well. And so we do have our ability to make the synthetic data and things like that, but also just the thought process of who is putting these things together. Even our leadership team needs to be diverse so that we can bring diverse thought into it, so that we don't have that built-in bias when we're creating these things. And Di may have more specifics around how we approach the bias issue though.
I think it's important to first understand that absolute bias mitigation is impossible. An absolute perfect system is impossible. Outside of math, there are very few absolute truths. So now what we're doing is we're looking at tools and baking into the design of systems to allow people to report, capture, acknowledge a bias if it does happen, or an unintended output of the model that may and will happen at some point in some system, and providing the avenues for contestability, for auditing, for the revisiting of data, for correcting that data, especially in the lens of our customers and what's specific to their business.
I mean, kind of random question actually from me. So what do we do with those data, right? So we have the opportunity to take this data in when maybe we're getting inaccurate responses, and outside of just like a thumbs up, thumbs down, human in the loop, like easy input back, like how do we then incorporate that data, those data, to train the model to be more accurate, less bias, et cetera?
So the one beauty, but also to the frustration I can imagine to some, ServiceNow has one of the most stringent data policies I've ever seen. And I say this as I've worked with like different companies, and sometimes that makes it very difficult to make an AI model better,
Okay.
but it also makes it very robust in the terms of safeguarding customer. So I cannot answer this as a blanket statement because it really depends on the data agreement that our customers have with us. Everyone that signs up, like, and I hope our legal team right now is not like, shut her down, like, shut her down. Speaking from what I know, working on the responsibility team, is that like our customers are made aware of what data we need, why it's needed, how it's needed for specific parts of the product. If they hand us the keys and certain parts of their models are trained, it's like on their part of their instance, and it's not commingled with other customers' data. Like that was a very important delineation when we were having these conversations, and even when I was, carrying my torch, knocking on doors before I really knew anything. So that's really important too. And there's often this, in the industry, there's a constant push and play and balance between like what safety versus like privacy. Safety, like you cannot be 100% safe. They say in order to be 100% safe, you just don't. You lock your data away, throw away the key.
It's a bubble.
Yeah, it's a bubble. So it's a constant push and play, but I think a lot of that is just trying to communicate with our customers with what their data is being used for, what we need. And our customers have been really great with telling us. We recently connected with our customers on published transparency model cards that we share out, and they're very vocal, and they tell us, we would like to know these aspects of data readiness. We would like to know how to prep our data to work with your systems. So it's been a very close collaboration, which has also been very cool with our customers.
I love that. So the transparency builds the trust in a lot of ways.
Yeah, we're super close to our customers' needs on this because it's so new, right? And so one of the things that Di was talking about is that we give them the ability to not only not commingle the data or use it for other purposes, but they can literally turn off data sharing. So only they have access to it. But this is a really important role that a company is not actually set up for right now. So we created a new role called data steward. And we had to teach companies who the right person would be to give access to that role. And that's the person that actually could control the yes, share, don't share. And so for us, it's not just enough to say, we're going to help you, we're going to have unbiased data, we're going to train you with things. We're going to actually help you create someone in your team that will have that ability to keep you safer, to abide by your specific rules in your country or your company. And so that's really important to us at ServiceNow, is to help our customers on that journey.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know, ServiceNow has a major project collaboration with Hugging Face, and we released Big Code project and the Star Coder project. And why I'm so proud of it is it's one of the first, I think it is the first, open source collaborative generative AI for code generation project where it allowed people to opt out of having their data as a part of the model training data.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That actually goes back to one of the earlier questions, like the can you turn it off? Right?
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
So the answer is yes.
I wanted to answer that actually. I was yes, our customers customers that buy in, yes, they have the option to turn it off.
The user personalization control is a different conversation.
Yeah.
Like, can you turn AI on or off? And I love the answer that you guys gave, because it really is something that we build into the product. You're not forced to use AI. It's an option. It's a human decision space, right? Until we build that trust. And even if it does become an automation, it's not because we automated it. It's because we gave the admin the control. So there's
Yeah.
still a
They're
human
deciding.
making the decision.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to actually have Jessa and Haley come back up here. Come be with us.
Two of my favorite people.
I know. I'm so excited to be with these ladies right here.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie.
Like you said, it's been like over 3 years of us all together.
And it's like a reunion.
Yeah.
This is a bit of a reunion, isn't it?
Completely reunion.
I mean, fun fact, I used to oversee our UX research AI platform team about 3 years ago. So this is actually exciting to see you all here. And you know what's great is I want to hear a little bit about the way that you work together, because honestly, this has been a real dream team. I've sat in a room with you where things were messy, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to happen. So I just really want to hear, from your perspective, like, how can our cross-functional teams work together? Are there special considerations or criticality for these relationships in an AI-focused team?
I can take a stab at that. Absolutely. I think having product teams in and specifically sharing user research video clips in those calls to sort of bridge that knowledge gap between people that are really just focused on the model and then people that are talking to the end users and the people interfacing with it. I'll never forget this moment. I was in a room with a team of data scientists, and I was sharing a clip of an admin trying to configure an AI experience in their organization. And they were introduced to this concept of training, like, you're training your model on data, here's the data that you choose, here's the output that you have. And the person that was on the call was like, training? Am I being trained? So there was this moment of just shock in the room with the data scientists. They were all like, they don't understand what that means. And I was like, exactly. Exactly. Better coming from them than it did me. So it's just been really interesting, to answer your question, to bring people in sort of across the user research journey and then share those moments directly with them to sort of bridge that gap and say, hey, there is, sort of differing needs depending on who you're talking to.
I think a big part for me and why at least this chemistry worked out so well, even with you, Avra, is I feel like we didn't get to work with each other that long. It was only briefly. But being willing to have the tough conversations. Like, there's many times where Rita, you, Avra will present something that I may not see from the business side of things and strategy and why certain decisions were made, and just being willing and open to have really tough conversations. I mean, I said this to Rita before, no one goes into AI ethics because they want to have a quiet, calm life. With that too, but everyone in this group has been willing to tell me at times, dye your little bunkers, this isn't gonna work.
Yeah, I would say for me, watching these ladies work together and working with them, for me, it's really the willingness to share the domain knowledge. So not only do the researchers take the time to really learn the product, not just the persona, but then they take the time to talk to the designers, talk to the PMs, and then the designers, and they're curious all the time. So they're in there in our brainstorms, they're in there in the concepts, and the fact that they are hungry for it and they share the knowledge, like they do these wonderful brown bags, and they share insights out beyond our group as well. For me, it's that open conversation, it's that collaboration, it's the, you can talk to me anytime, because we share this outcome. And I think that's really what's important, is if you have a shared outcome with the team, it doesn't matter what your role is, you make sure everyone on the team is successful.
Yeah, well, that speaks to something you and Avra do. When I said even with you, because I'm not on your team, Avra, but you often took a lot of time to mentor me through a lot of the processes and what your team was working on. You even adopted me in briefly, It was the same thing with you, Rita. Both of you from a leadership standpoint take a lot of time to mentor a lot of the others about the business, about our customers, about the technology.
Yeah, 100% echo all that. And yeah, I feel so lucky to have you two as like mentors to learn and grow from, honestly. And Di was the one who got me super into human-centered AI. I had only been here for like 4 months and not done research in AI until I started here a month in. And Di was like, this is what we're going to do. And so all the avenues to learn and grow. So I feel really lucky to be a part of this group too. But I think one of the things that's worked really well too is, yes, you have this whole broader cross-functional team, but where we found a lot of synergy and alignment is with the UX designers and content as well, where we all become really united, and this is the experience for the person that we need to drive towards together, and getting it on that leveled playing field where we all can champion to the product team more broadly and ask questions in a similar way too. I think that's been tremendously helpful. And lets us then get more headway into working with some of the broader product team space that we don't traditionally work with, like the data scientists, the ML engineers. These were newer people we had to form relationships with. And so I think that's been really helpful too.
Yeah, I've seen so much more impact to the roadmap when we come as a combined front and say this is the best experience for the user. We can actually make changes to it and influence it. And so I'm always so excited and proud to hear what they have to say, because I know it's going to make a change. It's not just, here's your answer, we did the research. It's, here's how we build the future. And so for me, that's what I loved seeing this team doing together.
So a true partnership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And really putting, humans first, users first, and making the best case.
Yep.
One of the questions that came through is, how you have these conversations with highly technical people. I think Haley kind of mentioned it already in her example of like, oh, okay. But do we have any other examples of the way that we kind of communicate in these two different languages sometimes?
I actually think Di is extremely skilled at straddling this. So I kind of want to put Di first, because I've learned so much from Di how she does this. So I want to give it to you first.
I wanted to share an analogy. I was traveling to a different country, and a country where not a lot of English speakers reside. And the first thing I learned how to say was, "I'm so sorry, I don't speak your language, and I may sound silly." And I remember just that little bit changed a lot of the discourse and the initial apprehensions of when I would approach people. So I think when it comes to, and this is my bias, I think when it comes to working with AI, I think both UX researchers, product people, non-technical people should learn at least a little bit about the core foundations of what you're designing and researching for. Otherwise, I feel as if it's like saying I want to create a house, but I don't want to deal with the math of how it stands or know the parts that go into it. And in the same way, what I found is when I'm working with technical people, I start with the constraints and I start with why I'm presenting this problem first. And I don't assume that there's a solution for it, but I try to bring the conversation in their language with a hybrid of like our language. One thing I learned is, for example, for a while we were talking about model cards, and for 2 months we were having two entirely different conversations. I was talking about transparency model fact sheets, and our design system partners were actually talking about a model card, a UI element, and we were going back and forth, and like I was talking to the UX engineer, and he goes, "But I feel like it needs to flip," and I go, "No, we could PDF it." And then both of us are looking at each other like we're having a very wrong, visceral reaction to each other's statement. And that's a common example. So like learning the vernacular of the space that you're entering will, in every industry, take you so far. Like so far.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think the house example is really great too. We can't just care about the people that live in the house.
Yes.
Right? We do need to understand how a house is built, because we need to know if what we're asking is technically feasible.
Yes.
Yeah. And the community. You can't just put a house anywhere. You can't just put a house
And And to the other side, like the people building the house need to know more about who's living in it.
Yeah.
Who are the visitors? Do they own cars? Are they commuters?
Yes. And who do I ask these questions to? These lovely ladies right here.
UX research for the win.
Tell me these answers. And then I asked Di to translate, what did the plumber just say? Like, how much do we need to spend? So it's important to have the right people in the right place.
I think Lynn has a really good follow-up question to this, which is, what are some of the challenges you faced when advocating for AI user research with other stakeholders when folks just want to ship it? And how do you define success?
So I'll take a crack at it, and then you guys can reflect on whether or not this is happening. But for me, it's definitely that unknown state. So yes, at the company and at any enterprise company, you have to talk about business value, right? It's not just the value to the customer, to the user, it's the value to the customer, the person who's buying it, right? And so the thing is, if we can't answer that question, if there's an unknown, right, or it's just one side of the value, maybe we know the value to the buyer, but what is the true value to the end user? That's where we get into the AI for AI's sake or AI for money's sake. So if I don't have an answer for that, that's what I will advocate for research. I'll say, you know what, I can design something, I can have my team do it, but we want to make sure we're doing the right thing. And so at that point in time, I can say, like, look, there will be a cost to you if we get it wrong.
That's right.
And
There's
so
always a downstream effect.
yeah, you always want to talk about that and say, like, I am going to let you know right now that the cost of pausing for a month to do research to make sure the direction's correct will save us so much headache in the long run. We will not lose trust with our customers. We will not lose trust in the industry. And so those are the levers that I use to bring in our team, and it's got to be on those places where we really can't come up with a good experience answer based on our current knowledge. It's for that new knowledge set.
Yeah, I think a really big thing too is just also informing our stakeholders what UX research is and how to work with us. Because I think sometimes they come in and they're like, oh, well, you guys are just going to do usability tests and you're going to make sure that it works and test the bugs, and that's great. But I think also saying, we can come in and tell you if people are going to trust this or not. And that's going to have a massive effect on adoption. And it's going to maybe require a little bit more discovery work and sort of, I guess, just informing our stakeholders and telling them what this impact will have on the actual use of the product beyond just the usability.
I think sometimes a lot of the teams that are going ship it view UX research like oracles, where they come to you and they say, take a look at this. This is great, right? Or if it's not great, tell us what's not great. And they go, okay, well, you gave us your feedback, so we can ship it now. And it's basically sharing that.
Way too late in the game.
Yeah.
I mean, there is the reality that sometimes we're brought in too late for things, right? When we have these amazing champions in place, and like Rita, who can recognize and bring us in, like that goes really far. So I think fostering the relationships where you get these champions who say like, hey, we do need to take a pause here before we go push this. Getting those higher up stakeholders is really critical, and who you can maybe go to and be like, I'm really worried about this. I've seen this happening, and I want to let you know too. It's not like the coolest thing, but like communicating those risks and making sure someone else knows too, I think can take some of the pressure off sometimes UX research. I've had some people on our team feel like, but it was my fault if it fails. And it's like, no, you communicated the risks and stuff, so helping to know who you can communicate it to if you don't feel heard. So at least you feel like I gave the risk, I shared it, I've done my due diligence. I think that's helpful in UX research and in AI space particular.
Yeah, the honest, open relationships with your leadership is so important. Like, it is so nerve-wracking to me sometimes to send you, Rita, like a research plan, or like questions that I want to ask, for example, around the model cards and stuff. But then it's like being able to build a relationship with your leadership where you can say, hey, I actually think this project needs just one more month so that we can scope this out, and gathering people that can come to your corner and help make that case and help make things happen.
Yeah, researchers shouldn't feel alone, is
Yeah,
what I'm trying to say. Like, you shouldn't feel alone. Like, you have a community of people who will get aligned and see like what that risk might be to the experience, and really feeling, I think, empowered to share that and get those people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I trust them to tell me and push back on me too. So if I say, you guys, we can use and extrapolate this data, right? We're good. And they will tell me no. And I am happy to hear that, because that's why I ask them, right? I want them to feel that ability to say, hey, this isn't done right, or we need more of this, or I'm getting pushback from my project team, I need some support. Always happy to help and jump in, because it will trickle to me eventually if I'm not helping, but the end user will have a say, right?
That's
and so
right.
it's not going to get hidden, it's not going to go away. We're all going to hear it the next time we talk to them.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's better
you-
to hear it in the room.
Yeah.
You gave practical advice earlier too on so say you really have to ship it and you don't have time. Jessa was talking about leveraging previous research. Can you do
Always,
secondary
yes,
research?
yeah.
Yes.
Can you make parallels from
Yeah.
papers that exist and apply
Yeah.
them to this case? There's something to be said about being scrappy in moments like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Absolutely.
That help.
Just path
Any
forward.
info is better than no info.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I realize I took us right to time. Do we have any questions in the room? Yes, sir.
Actually, I have one. So going back to your strategy of pragmatic AI adoption that you mentioned earlier, so identifying that workflows that are performed by people and then looking for opportunities to augment them or accelerate them with Gen AI. I was just wondering, what's the bottleneck in that task? What's the hardest part of it from your perspective?
So I think one of the things that a lot of companies will find hard, that we actually, it's not as hard here, is seeing that journey first. Understanding what is the workflow and where are their pain points. Our researchers, especially in this area, are really strong at making user journeys and showing diagrammatically where the pain points might be, so that we can go in and brainstorm and we can go in and do concepts against those pieces. But if you don't have a good understanding of where the pain is already in the workflow, if you have to go and spend the time and doing the focused interviews to find out what that company or that person really needs, you're going to have to spend time there first and then convince your company that this will impact it. But keeping persona knowledge, keeping user journeys, UX researchers updating them, will help you get over that first hurdle, because then you can apply the skills and say, this skill here, this generative AI skill, summarization or generation, will help us close the gap on the pain points. And so it's that identification, I think, is the biggest burden.
And I think something Jessa and Haley do really well in their user journeys and when they're having these discussions and I'm learning about what they're researching is they often don't just look at the person who's interfacing directly with the technology, but they're great at looking at the extended impact too. How does this trickle down and impact other people that are in the pipeline?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, then actually the main challenge of leveraging AI is to understand how to actually use it.
It's how to understand where your users need help. It's the same problem across any product, honestly, right? You start from the same space, but then when you're assessing, is this the right pain point for generative AI? That's when you have to think about AI for AI's sake, right? So not all 7 pain points in the journey should be solved by generative AI, but that is where you want to start to look to see how can I help, right? And that's for us. That's where we start. Is how do we help? How do we support? What's the right space for this? And then how do we extend it to other products?
I think a big challenge for me is getting people to pause and answer the question, do we need AI for
I was
this?
going to say, does it make sense?
Does it make sense? Is the cost and the risk worth what the outcome is? What does AI do? And the second question is okay, well, if you ask, what does AI do in this scenario that is better than alternatives like robotic process automation or
Classic AI. Yeah, you asked earlier, and you're waiting for them. What's one of the silliest applications you've seen so far?
Yes.
And I won't call anyone out, but there are a lot of things that come across my desk, right? And so I review a lot of different designs and possibilities and vision pieces. And a lot of the time, some of my feedback will be, could this be done with a different product like Doc and Tell or Task and Tell, or could this be classic, machine learning or similarity models? Why are we using generative AI here? So they'll get a review back from me with a question of why are you doing this, as opposed to this is good or this is bad. I want them to think through it, right? Because as a designer, you shouldn't just be designing to your requirements. That's when you're going to get an LLM pen. You should be designing to the need and to the problem. And so that's when you'll run into problems if you don't keep that in mind, and you just start making chatbots everywhere.
You'll also, like, sometimes you have a pragmatic approach to something. For example, like facial recognition with computer vision, that then becomes a use case, which is not, it's worse than AI for AI's sake. I mean, we all heard about like superimposing people's images and these images of people being used in nefarious ways.
Yeah.
There's a whole ethical consideration around like the applications of taking something that's incredibly useful, that fits many use cases, and then really evaluating, okay, what do we do with those use cases now that these capabilities exist? How do you safeguard that?
Yeah, or using them and not studying the fact that it maybe won't recognize everyone.
Yep.
And so that's something that, like, if you just apply it because everyone else is doing it, you're gonna find out a little bit late. Yeah.
Yeah, don't just follow the trend, right?
Yeah.
Right.
No.
Like, think for yourself here.
Be curious, ask questions.
Please do.
Any other questions in the audience?
Really good questions today, though.
Yeah.
Have to call it.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess that's it for us. We're running about 5 minutes over. I just want to say thank you so much. I feel like I really learned something today. So that's a win.
This was
Yes.
so much fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. It's been
so much.
amazing.
Of course,
Thank
of
you so
course.
much.
So, and thank you so much for Alec and Lerner for setting this event up. We appreciate you so much. We hope everybody tunes in on May 21st. We'll be live from Santa Clara that day to talk about UXR business strategy. Okay. Thank you. I know, I felt it. I was like, Joe.